start. I don't think it's going to take the whole time. Hopefully, I mean, Shakespearean sonnets aren't that hard when you know the format. So there's some introductory stuff that you should know about Shakespeare and his life. Read through that, take down a few notes. I mean, I know that I said the other day that in the introductory material to the 16th century that you can kind of skim it, jot a few things down. It's not essential for you to, write 10 pages of notes over that material. But I do think that it's important to pay attention to the background on Shakespeare. I mean, he's the preeminent poet, playwright of all of English literature. So, it's good to know some things about Shakespeare, the time period, how he fits into the time period. We're going to read one of his plays. We looked at 5 of his sonnets for today. So, he's the significant figure in literary history for English literature. So I do think that you should have that background. Also, we're going to touch on the study guide a little bit here. So if you have that handy, then you can, we'll bring it up after I talk about these 5 sonnets briefly, then I'll go to the study guide and see if you have any questions over really any of the poetry from this week. Discussion number 3 is about Renaissance poetry. So it's a good time to ask any questions that you might have or, kind of wrap up. I prepared a Jamboard. I don't know if you all know what a Jamboard is. I don't like the name of that. It sounds weird, but that's what it's called on Google. I prepared a Jamboard, which is just basically, it's sort of like a slideshow that you can write on, and it's got tools over here that you can highlight and circle stuff. And I put all 5 of the sonnets on here. If you would like to make a copy of that and make your own notes on the Jamboard, then you can find it. I did make it available to you here under other materials in the unit on Blackboard. So you can click here. I just called it a workspace for 5 sonnets. So if you want to, you can open that and make your own copy. I'll probably mark on it as I'm talking. In class, I would have my document camera and I would be writing on copies of these poems a little bit. But if you wanted to follow along in the workspace, then you could do that. Otherwise, maybe you're more of a notebook person. I made that sonnet tutorial or like a refresher so that you could remember that sonnets have a very specific structure, and Shakespearean sonnets have their own unique organization pattern. So we're always looking with these, we're always looking for, where's the little pen? Here we go. We're always looking for quatrains, right? We're always looking for these groups of 4 lines and then a couplet at the end. And when we break the sonnet up in that way, we can see that there's a progression. So the first quatrain is always about the basic idea that the poem is addressing. The second quatrain builds off of that idea with either a new metaphor or an extension of the first one. And then the third one is usually a shift into another direction, or it adds on to the other 2. In this case, I can already tell that it's going to be a shift because, I wanted it to be clear. I guess I'll have to draw it with my pen. Because of the word but right here, tells us that we're going to be having a shift. And it's a traditional spot for the volta right there on line 9. We even see that in the Petrarchan sonnets. So this poem goes like this. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou ownest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So this poem is about pretty much the same thing that the I Wrote Her Name Upon a Strand, the Spenser poem that we looked at on Tuesday. It's about the permanence that humans desire and can never achieve because of our mortality. In this case, it's about the beauty of the beloved. The speaker is speaking to someone, we call that the intended audience, right? The person that the speaker is directly addressing, and we're just sort of like observing it. And so he says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thee meaning the person that he is talking to. And so he said, that's the main idea of the poem. I'm going to compare you to a beautiful summer day. The only thing is that you're way more beautiful than a summer's day, right? You all can put this in your back pocket for Valentine's Day. If you use this poem for Valentine's Day, you should probably credit Shakespeare. It says, thou art more lovely and more temperate. So we know just from the first quatrain that it's about how you're even more beautiful than the summer. And the reason is because he says, summer's lease hath all too short a date. In other words, summer is going to switch into fall and not be permanent. But your beauty, he says on the Volta here, your eternal summer, there's the metaphor, right? Your eternal summer shall not fade. Remember also that when we talk about seasons, there are stages of life that go along with that, right? So like youth is spring and your prime is like summer, your waning years are like autumn, and then your death is winter. So when he says thy eternal summer, he means the peak of her beauty. And it says it won't fade. That's why she's better than a summer's day. Even death will not diminish your beauty. Why? Because I have put you into this poem and now you are eternal. Like a snapshot, right? I've taken a picture of you in this poem and now your beauty will live on forever. And nowadays we're used to taking pictures, but they didn't have that. They didn't have that. So I guess this is sort of like the Instagram capture the moment type element. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, like so long as people are alive and they can read this poem, then your beauty will live on. This poem and your beauty will live on. And so you're never really going to die, and I'm capturing you in this moment of your perfect qualities, right? Any questions on that poem before I have 5 that I want to talk about a little bit? That's a famous poem. I mean, you probably heard that line before. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It pops up in popular culture sometimes. There are a lot of Shakespearean things that do that, like to be or not to be. That's Hamlet. Okay, the second one is number 29. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. So this is a good example of how Renaissance poetry has a positive spin on the end, even if it's got like a morbid theme to it or a depressed tone, the ending usually comes up, and usually the ending is like a look toward a more positive future. In this case, we have the first quatrain setting the speaker's situation, is what we call it. In other words, what is it that the speaker is, what's his environment, what's his problem, what's he going to be writing about. And in this case, it's about being in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. Now, fortune here is capitalized, and that's going to come up in literature later on too. He doesn't mean money. Fortune here is referencing the goddess Fortune from mythology, who is the goddess of fate. So in ancient times, and even in through, well, even up until today, the Wheel of Fortune, the game show, is based on a mythological concept of fortune. Fortune, the goddess, had a wheel. I don't know if I've ever explained this to you. Maybe it came up when we were doing Oedipus. I don't know. Anyway, Fortune had a wheel that she would spin, and that would determine your fate. So the Greeks could kind of like say, well, it's up to Fortune, whatever Fortune decides. And she was like, in their minds, a literal goddess that would spin the wheel. So he means fate. So when I'm in disgrace or disfavor, there's a side note here to help you with fate and men's eyes. When people are looking down on me, and when fate is turning its back on me, and I'm not having very good luck, I all alone beweep my outcast state. So I am, upset about that, and troubled deaf heaven with my bootless cries. Okay, so that adds to the idea. Also, besides fate and men's eyes disfavoring him, so is God. God is also not responding. Heaven is deaf here in line 3. So even God isn't listening to me, and look upon myself and curse my fate. So this is his situation when I'm feeling like that. The next quatrain just extends that idea. So he just continues heaping on the problems of feeling, depressed about life. So when fate wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him, when I start wishing that I was more like this person, when I wish I had the talents of that person or this man's abilities, and I'm not contented with my own life and the things that used to interest me, with what I most enjoy contented least, then we have the shift again right here, right? In line 9. So the third quatrain there is the volta. Yet, in these thoughts myself almost despising, when I think about these self-hating feelings, haply I think on thee. So there's another sort of like vague person that he's writing about, or two. When I start, luckily, I have you to think about, right? And then my state shifts. And now it's like the birds at break of day. So kind of like you're the one good thing in my life that can bring me out of my sadness and my depression. And he compares that person to the lark. The lark is a morning bird. It sings in the morning. So he now, instead of heaven being deaf, there are hymns being sung at the gates of heaven. So there's a shift there. And then the couplet, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Then I think to myself, I wouldn't even want to change position with a king, because then I wouldn't have you. I might have good fortune, I might have good potential, I might have all those things that I feel like I'm missing. Fate would be on my side, but you wouldn't. And so I wouldn't want to even change. I wouldn't even want to change my position, because you're more important. Aww. Aww. Hallmark. Do people even give cards anymore? I do, but I don't know if people do. So this one has that turn at the end, that idea that, well, all this might be pretty crappy these days, but at least I've got you. I don't know, that seems kind of appropriate for COVID times, this poem. It's just coming to me that it's kind of like COVID times poem. Hopefully you have someone or something that can make you not want to change your state with kings. All right, I didn't see any questions on that one. Okay, 55. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents than unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful war shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry, nor Mars his sword, nor war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. 'Gainst death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room, even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. So till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. Okay, this one's a lot like the first one in its basic concept. The only thing is that it's not as much of a love poem. The first one we looked at, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, is about keeping the beauty of the beloved alive. And this one is just about how, let me put the quatrains in there, how whoever the poem is about will live forever. Shakespeare had a number of patrons, and I know that you read about that in the background about Shakespeare. Patrons would support artists and writers so that they couldn't have time to create. And so sometimes they would pay those people back by writing poems for them or about them. And so in this case, he may have been writing this for one of his patrons. We just don't really know. Hi, Salem. So this one is about how all of those things that we erect statues and we try to memorialize famous people, all these monuments that we put up on their graves and so on, are not going to outlive this work. That eventually they'll crumble, they'll fall away, they'll be damaged, they'll, they're going to be not remembered anymore, but the power of the word will live on. And so it's about the power of the memory of whoever he's writing about, but in a way it's more about the power of the written word, and how once something's written down and published, it's permanent as much as you can be. 10,000 years from now, will it still be permanent? We don't really know, but at least something written down will last longer than a gilded monument. Now that's an exaggeration. I mean, statues are pretty solid. But he says sometimes war comes along, and when war comes along, things get demolished or ruined on purpose by the incoming regime. And he starts talking in the second quatrain about the wasteful war overturning the statues and exploding them and that sort of thing. And Mars is referenced here. Mars here is referencing the god of war, the Roman god of war. Ares is his equal in Greek mythology, but Mars, they're not talking about the planet, they're talking about the god that the planet's named after. So even Mars, the god, won't be able to burn the living record of your memory. Even war, the embodiment of war, can't do that. Against death and all oblivious enmity, that's just sort of anger and hatred, shall you pace forth. So you will continue no matter what, basically, because I've written about you here in this poem. So till the judgment that yourself arise, the judgment in heaven, right? The judgment day, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. So people will always look at this poem, and so your memory will persist longer than the works of masons. So that permanence element is similar in those two sonnets. Do you guys have any questions on that one? I'm trying to focus on just what the poem is saying, because discussion number 3 is going to ask you to write about how these poems demonstrate the qualities of Renaissance poetry. So you're going to have to put, I did a slideshow on that on Tuesday. So if I go through what the poems are saying, it will help you where you don't have to do, all of that sort of translation or wonder if your interpretation works. And then you can just focus on how do they show the Renaissance poetry qualities. I have two more to go. So the next one, I like this one a lot. This one is a lot like the Spenser sonnet too, because it's got the waves in it. So this is sonnet 60. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. Each changing place with that which goes before, in sequent toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith being crowned, crooked eclipses against his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand. Okay, so here you see that same idea. This written word is going to outlast time, or at least known human time. So we start off with a simile in this one, which is kind of different than the others. Like as the waves make toward the pebble shore, so do our minutes hasten. So the waves are being compared to the minutes of our lives. And you've probably been to the beach. The waves come in and they just, one after the other, never ceasing. And so every minute of our lives is ticking down. That's sort of oppressive. Changing place with that which goes before. We can't do anything about that. We can't do anything about time. We can't do anything about the waves. The waves gradually eating at the shore, and the minutes gradually eating at our lives. That's depressing for a Thursday morning. He goes on in the next quatrain to say about the span of life, right? Nativity is when we're born. We use the word nativity at Christmas time, but it means when anybody's born, because Christmas time, we just use that because of the birth of Christ. So nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity. So the baby crawls and grows up, and time that gave, when you were born, you have all of your life spread before you. Now does his gift confound. He kind of takes it back over time. And then you wake up and you're 70 years old and you realize, where did the time go? And so that is a continuation of that idea. It's just that it's a different comparison. This one is a comparison with the waves and the shore, and this one is a comparison to a child and growing, like the stages of, human growth. Then in the third quatrain, we have time doth transfix the flourish set on youth. So it's about how when you're young, the beauty and artistry that you have when you're young is arrested, and it's stopped as you get older. And there's even a reference to wrinkles, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, right? The wrinkles that you get on your forehead or between your eyebrows. I don't know if you can see mine. I have them. I do have them. But so time will etch those into your face and feeds on the rarities of nature's truth. It takes all that away from you, and nothing stand. And until there's nothing left but death to come with his scythe. A scythe is like that long stick with a curved blade on it that they used to use to mow grass, but you see it with the Grim Reaper, right? And the imagery and the metaphor there is that he's coming to mow you down. He's coming to take your life. And so the final, this is kind of mild, right? Like the waves coming in and coming out. Your life is like, being, the minutes are passing, and then it's like a child, and then death is coming to mow you down. I don't know, that last quatrain's kind of like brutal. Maybe it's because I'm 52, I don't know, maybe. And yet to times in hope my verse shall stand. And so there's that idea. So even though death is coming, hopefully my words will still live on. And I mean, that's every human being's idea, is that they can find a way to extend their lives or be immortal through their, you know, children, or through their deeds, or through their art, or, you know, like their accomplishments. So it speaks to that. And I'm hoping you're seeing that most of these poems have that concept. And that's definitely going along with the Renaissance idea of trying to beat mortality. There's a little tip for your discussion number 3. All right, last poem. I know I'm going a little longer on these, so I'll do this one kind of quickly. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet bird sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Ere means before. Should I try to write it with this little pen? I don't know if that's going to be any good. They don't tell you that in the glossing. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, so this one, same kind of idea, right? Time is ticking. Death is coming. It's almost the end. And then that final couplet is the idea that there's something that can remain. In this case, it's not the poetry, though. In this case, he says, you can look at me and see basically autumn, right? Yellow leaves. They're falling off the trees. It's cold. So this is definitely, you know, fall. I shouldn't take time to do this, and it looks like a first grader. Sorry. Where it's getting cold, so it's the end of somebody's life. When we talk about the seasons in literature, it's usually about that cycle. We remember that from the summer reading. And then here also the sun is fading. Not only is it going into winter, but also we have this, the twilight is past the sunset. It's when there's still color in the sky, but the sun already went down. So it's pretty close to the end there. And death's second self, you know, that nighttime. And then here is a fire. So there's 3 metaphors. The first one is autumn. The second one is the sunset. And the third one is the fire, but it's not even the fire anymore. It's just these embers that are left on the ashes. It's pretty depressing. So it's clearly the very end of life, but we have this thou perceivest. You see this, I'm getting old, but that makes your love stronger. So the idea is that when you know somebody is old or sick, or, you know, not going to be around, like you have to start recognizing they're not going to be around forever, a grandparent, etc. You tend to not love them more, but spend more time with them. And it brings them more dear to you because you know that your memories are going to be all that you have in a little while. So he says, that makes thy love more strong, to love that well, which thou must leave before long. So, you know, it's kind of like when your mom's like, well, let's go spend time with grandma or aunt, whoever. Maybe they're in a home or a hospital, or, you know, that sort of thing. The idea that when somebody gets to the end, we want to spend more time with them because we would like to recapture that time and keep it and hold it as a memory. So there are a lot of echoes throughout these poems of similar themes that you could find, and I've tried to bring some of those up in the discussion of the poems. I want to ask you if you have any questions from the study guide. For this one, instead of individual questions about the poems, I just sort of said for each poem, you should be able to do these things. And so now I've been through all of these this week. Are there any like mix and match things like on Sonnet 18? Could you talk about, I mean, I went through the structure on all of them, but are there any elements from the study guide that you want me to spend a little time talking about? I feel like playing the Jeopardy song. Okay, there's no discussion this week, but discussion number 3 is for next Friday, and it's going to ask you to work with these poems. And basically, your discussion post is about how do you see the elements of Renaissance poetry in these, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 8 poems. And you're supposed to choose, I think, 2, and really talk about how they demonstrate the qualities of romantic poetry. So you could be thinking about that for next week, working on that discussion. I know that people who sit down to do their discussions on Friday, probably it takes longer than they expect. So I do think it's a good idea to, kind of work on it throughout the week, get it going so that you have some starting point when you go to sit down to do your discussion. But the discussions last week, I haven't finished looking at the ones for discussion number 2, but they all look pretty good. I think you guys are doing a good job. I'm trying to interact with you on your content too. All right, I don't see anything about that. So the last thing for today is for me to talk a little bit about Othello. If you look on the calendar, you'll see that we're going to go through Othello act by act. We're going to read the whole play. For Tuesday next week, make sure that you have read Act 1, which if you look on the readings list, I put the page numbers in the PDF. Now, this gets a little complicated, but I'm sure you can follow. You guys are muy inteligente. This PDF is not the same PDF that you have been looking at all along. That PDF is a older edition of our textbook. The physical textbook has Othello in it, but I think most of you are going by the PDF. So I found a different PDF of Othello, and so you can read it here. So it's still here for you, but it's just not the original PDF. So I just took pictures of the book. I hate to say, you can find Othello pretty much anywhere online. Maybe I'll put in like a link to an online version, maybe. But this is just the book. So I just took as a PDF. So you could download it, put it in Cami, and annotate if you wanted to. But it's just the pages of the text of the big book. So that one is Act 1 is for, where do I want to go? Act 1 is for Tuesday. I made a different study guide for each class period. So what I do not intend to do, just so that you're aware, is go through the plot of Othello. That will take way too long. What I will do is each study guide has a variety of things to be thinking about in that act. So there will be questions just to make sure you're catching on. And then there'll also be significant quotations. So probably what I'll do when we come together again on Tuesday is open up the study guide and start talking about the different scenes in Act 1. This whole document is Act 1. So I probably won't talk on all these things, but I'll definitely talk about the ones that you want me to talk about. And I'll probably pick a couple of the quotations that I think are significant, but don't expect me to do, a summary of Act 1. That I just don't have time to do that. So you should read that or read some summaries online to accompany your reading of the text. But the study guide will point out the most important elements of the scenes and give you some focus elements I'll go through the study guide with a little more detail, obviously on Tuesday, once you've read Act 1. But I've put this list of key concepts because these are topics that show up throughout the entire play. The same list of key concepts shows up in every act because you should be thinking about how are these ideas progressing in the piece. So we'll talk about the study guide, but we won't be doing a summary situation. If that, so just to prepare you for that. I wanted to open. Maybe I'll just do it on Tuesday. Okay, so just a little bit of an intro to Othello. The reading will do that. You'll have some stuff in the reading that will give you a little bit of introduction to Othello. Othello is a tragedy. So, that means people are gonna die. Don't get too attached. And Othello is also a story about soldiers. Othello is a soldier. Many of the characters are soldiers. Always refer back to the list of characters as you're starting the first act of a play so that you can start remembering who's who and what's what. Othello obviously is our main character, and he is a Moor, Moor. And I don't know if the textbook goes into some detail about what a Moor is, but a Moorish person is somebody who is from North Africa. So oftentimes that is translated to mean that Othello is Black. And I'm thinking we might, if we have time, I do have a good video, like film version of Othello. So if we go through the study guide, maybe we'll have time to watch Act 1 together and see, kind of watch that version, and maybe that can help you with a summary type thing. Sometimes it's enriching to watch the video version of something that you've read so that you can pick up on some details. But Othello is a Moor, and he has married Desdemona, who is the daughter of a well-to-do man in Venice, Italy. And so the play starts off in Venice, Italy, and it's about the fact that those two have been married, but also there's an impending war that's about to take place. And because Othello and some of the other characters are soldiers, that is an element also in the exposition of conflict that's going to arise. So that's just a little brief overview, but Act 1 is for Tuesday. I highly recommend that you get a little bit ahead in your reading if you can this weekend, because it's going to go fast. Act 2 is Thursday, then Acts 3 and 4 are the following Tuesday, and then we'll wrap up with Act 5. We have to get through Paradise Lost before well, we're not reading all of Paradise Lost, but we have to get through Paradise Lost before the midterm, because that's the last work that's on the midterm exam. Oh no, Gulliver's Travels. No, that Gulliver's Travels isn't on the exam, but we'll start looking at it before we leave. Or maybe it is. Yeah, it is on the midterm. We're only reading one little piece of Gulliver's Travels. We're only reading one little piece of each thing. So I guess I'm just asking, are there any questions before we take our long weekend? And hopefully you have some time tomorrow without a discussion due that you can, I would say relax, but you probably just work on stuff for other classes. Is everybody okay? All right, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm hoping that you all